Hey y'all, I'm here with Jennifer Toon, who is the project director for Lioness Justice Impacted Women's Alliance. We're here to talk about some of the mail that we've received talking about feminine hygiene and the great lengths the incarcerated ladies are having to go through in order to get new feminine hygiene products. Why don't we talk about what's happening on the Patrick O'Donnell unit?
Yeah, formerly known as the Mountain View unit. So we've received some correspondence from several ladies, and I was incarcerated at that unit, so this is not news to me. But you know, when they are issued their feminine hygiene products, sometimes they would issue that through Property and Supply. We'd have to get up in the middle of the night to do it. Sometimes they bring it to the dorm. Other times the laundry would issue it, and so that would be those pads and tampons that we would need each month. So a way to keep us from accessing those, because they don't like to spend money on it, is that, like I said, they would have us go to Property and Supply at midnight, Marci, to get these supplies. So a lot of people just wouldn't go because they're tired and they're sleeping, so you don't get your tissue and you don't get your tampons and pads, right? Like, you know, this is a necessity.
This is a population that works some pretty hard, laborious jobs. A lot of ladies out in the sun for 8 hours a day and are sound asleep and might not even hear the call at midnight.
And we wrote it up. We wrote grievances. We finally, they started bringing it around to the dorms. But what that meant was that an officer had to go with someone and load up the tissue and load up the supplies to take to each dorm. So then it's like, okay, well, that's a pain and a burden, so why don't they just issue it at laundry when you get your clothes? It makes sense, right? You get your razor issued there. But here's the tactic there, is that this is not the first time I've heard this, but what they're saying now is that the staff in the laundry, particularly the captain, was, requiring that they prove that they still menstruate, that they still have a period. And when I was there, they would tell the elderly women, I'm not issuing you any pads or tampons because you shouldn't be bleeding. So a lot of times, those older ladies use pads for other health concerns. So it's just another tactic. Of course, the unit is saying that that's not happening and they don't do that. There were also times, I don't know if this happened to you at Murray, is that when we were at work or we were in education, if we needed a pad or tampon and we had to ask the staff for it, they would tell us to go in the bathroom and show me.
We absolutely had that, especially in education. That was an issue. They did not want to, the way it works in education is we weren't allowed to bring in our own feminine hygiene products that we had purchased on commissary or had been issued from the dorm. So you're there at school and you need to change. You are at the mercy of the staff, and I don't know what they thought we were going to do.
Well, Marci, I think it goes back to this discussion about control, about women and their bodies, their sexuality, their reproductive health. And I always found it really disheartening that this was often from female staff, who would do this. And so what is it in female officers that drive them to treat other women in their care like this? And I'm not saying everybody, but it was because the men will give it to you. They're like, here, because they don't want to talk about it, they don't want to deal with it. Here's some pad, here's some tampon, get away from me. It was those women in authority that would do this kind of stuff. But we see that in mail rooms, about the mail, and I don't know what the explanation for that is, why females in correctional settings in authority behave like that towards us. I've never figured that out.
There's some kind of societal kind of this idea that women who are incarcerated are like heartless. We don't care about our families. We don't care about our kids. That's not for men. I think people don't think that. When a man gets arrested, they don't think about what about his kids.
Right.
And when women get arrested, I don't know if that plays into it. I wanted to touch for a moment about the crisis center, which we called the ice house because it was very cold. And it was the place where incarcerated women were sent when they were in crisis of hurting themselves or harming others. And it was very harsh. You're put in a very cold, sterile cell with nothing. There's like a little metal, it's a concrete floor, but there's like a little metal pad in the floor that's where you're supposed to sleep. And you don't even get a blanket the first couple days.
Right.
If you are on your cycle, you have to prove that you need a clean pad. So first of all, you don't have any clothes. So if
you just have to hold it against yourself.
Yes. And then when you need to change, you have to, it's a horrible, male or female officers, it doesn't matter, because male officers, even though you are completely nude and without covering for part of the time, men work that facility, and because it's crisis management, they walk every 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So every 15 minutes, someone's coming to look at you of any gender, and you're completely exposed. So we would have to take the pad, the dirty pad, and hold it up to the window for them to see that it was soiled. And if they didn't deem that it was soiled enough,
you have to put it back on.
You have to hold it back to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was just very degrading, and then especially for someone that's already in a mental health crisis.
Yeah. Well, and our members that are writing us about these kind of issues, they know their stuff, right? Because they're like, well, they're not supposed to be doing this according to the women's dignity bills that was two legislative sessions ago that make sure that women have access to hygiene, feminine hygiene products whenever they want. I know that when I've been in the facility since I've been out, there's little signs that say, you can ask whenever you need it. Okay, but that doesn't seem to be the case when you're actually being issued your supply. And I'm telling you, this happened a lot at Mountain View, this very petty control over the tiniest little bitty, and I think too, maybe with female guards and female staff members, it is that way that society has treated them. So then, power corrupts, abuse, like people who are abused tend to take that out on other people a lot. I think even just those of us who have committed offenses that were reactive, right? That could even be really violent, even towards other women, right? Is a reaction to abuse, right? Like, so I always thought, well, maybe that's why female staff members would treat us so degrading. It was because they too had been degraded above them. And so it just kind of trickles down to attack the people underneath me as a way to establish power for themselves. But
the culture, it's the complete culture of oppression inside of our prisons. It's made to keep people oppressed and not lift them up. They don't want us to have dignity. So I was incarcerated when those dignity bills got passed. And I remember that they put up a memo on the bulletin board, and everybody was like, oh my goodness, because previously, if you needed an extra in addition to the small amount that they issued every month, then you had to go, if you didn't have commissary, you weren't able to purchase it, or they didn't have it available on commissary because they were out. You had to beg, borrow, trade, all of which is against the rules. So anyways, at first they were like, yes, you definitely can. And then as months progressed on, that just faded away.
Right.
That wasn't happening
went
anymore.
Back to, a part of it is Property and Supply did not want to spend money on that. I know that, and maybe this has changed, but the Property and Supply officers that order all the supplies for the unit, when they save money, they get a raise, they get a bonus, right? Like, so they are constantly looking for ways to save money on the budget. And so for a long time, years ago, Marci, when I got incarcerated, we didn't have tampons. Our unit never saw tampons, right? Then we find out that Property and Supply can order them. They just never have, because it was cost saving, right? And it was like, what? Who? And this was a female Property Supply officer, So I appreciate the girls writing and telling us, and I know that TDCJ says, Texas Department of Criminal Justice says, well, the unit says that's not happening, or things have changed since Miss Toon or Miss Marci Marie has been there. But please remember, we have a growing over 300 members on the inside, and growing quickly, that tell us immediately when stuff happens. And these are one of those issues that we will always elevate, because it is a direct reflection of that weird shaming and controlling of female bodies.
Thanks so much for your insight.
Yeah.
Tunchi, my co-host of On the Recyard Women's Prison Podcast. You guys can check that out anywhere where you listen to your favorite podcasts, right here on my channel, or I'll also put the On the Recyard link in the description of this video. If you'd like to support Lioness, Justice Impacted Women's Alliance, you can do so at www.lionessjiwa.org.